Death is the opposite of birth. At the time of birth, the soul enters the world. At the time of death, the soul departs. The ancient Aramaic word for death, ma'alta, when literally translated means not here, present elsewhere. It is said of death that it is a tax on the soul for having had a name and form, and that death is not the extinguishing of the light, but the putting out of the lamp because the dawn has come. Death is more than a biological event. At the moment of death, the veil between dimensions seems to lift, and we get a glimpse of the light and love of our true spiritual nature as soul.
At the moment of death, death is swallowed up. And it's beautiful. I've had the privilege of being there when people have crossed over. And I have had the privilege of being there when the veil between this world and the next begins to thin. And if you're spiritually conscious with the soul who is crossing over at the moment of their leaving, you can feel that light. You can taste that joy.
The time of death is different for everybody. Sometimes when I've sat with people who are dying, it's just quiet and the person leaves and you know that something's happened. They're not there anymore, that spirit has moved on. But with my mother, it was a very special experience. It was about 3 in the morning at the time of her passing, and we'd said goodbye to each other for the last time about midnight, and then she'd gone to sleep. And my son Justin, who was about 20 at that time, and I were sitting with her. We were on opposite sides of her bed, and I was having a quiet time. I was just praying, meditating. My eyes were closed, and all of a sudden I had a very vivid vision. I opened my eyes after this vision, and the whole room seemed to be made out of light. I know that might be hard to understand, but it was like everything was made of particles of light. My mother and the bed and the ceiling, everything was so beautiful. And I looked across the bed and I saw my son Justin. And Justin was weeping. Tears were just streaming down his face, and he had this wonderful, soft look, this look of awe on his face. And he said to me, "Mom, the room is filled with light. Can you see it?" And boy, I said to him, "Yeah, I see it. I see the light." And he said, "It's Grandma. Grandma is holding open the door to eternity for us so that we can catch a glimpse." And then he went on, he looked at me with so much love, and he said, "You know, Grandma was a very great soul. She came to this world and she took a role, she took a part much smaller than the wisdom in her soul, so that you could have something to push against, you could have something to resist and become fully who you are."
I received this from students of mine who are nurses, and they observed a nun die, or slowly die. And this woman was in great pain, and she was very anxious about dying, and she was especially anxious about having her rosary beads and other religious paraphernalia at hand at all times. That was the most important thing to her. Well, it appears that at a certain point, about a half a day before she died, she had a classic vision of a spiritual presence. She left her body, entered into the light, and after the experience was all over, she lost all interest in her rosary beads. And the nurses who were my students asked her, "Well, how come don't you care about these rosary beads anymore?" She said, "I don't need them anymore. I've seen the real thing." And then she, very peacefully, with a smile on her face, left. It's a lovely story. I've never forgotten that. It shows, you see, that somehow this person on the threshold of death caught a glimpse of a spiritual reality that she had believed in and hoped for all her life. But at that moment of transition, she experienced it in the fullness of its reality.
Remember my grandmother's passing. She was a Sicilian lady and spoke mostly Sicilian. And for the last 6 years of her life, she had what was then known as arteriosclerosis of the brain and nervous system. So she was like a vegetable, and we took care of her, and we took care of all her functions. But an hour before she passed on, suddenly she woke up from this stupor that she'd been in for 6 years. She woke up, and she started to address something in the upper left-hand corner of the room, whom she addressed as her husband, Prospero, who had been a very fat man. I mean, my grandfather, Prospero, knew of his feet only by rumor, because, you know, his chin started around here. He used to eat pizzas by the stack. Hey, Prospero, que bella, how beautiful you look. Hey, you got a figure back. Hey, you know. Only this was in very lyrical Italian. Then she addressed her daughter, who had died 40 years before, and then a son who had died 3 months before, who's named Paolo, we didn't think she knew about. But she would listen, and she would laugh and laugh and laugh and talk to them and listen, yes, and talk. And my little Aunt Gracie said, Mom, do you know me? And she said, Aspetta, Graziella. Hold it, Gracie. Can't you see? They've come for me. And Gracie looked up and said, but Mom, there's nobody there. She said, hey, Gracie, Graziella, you can't see them because they haven't come for you. They come for me. And she said, Mom, but Mom, for the last 5-6 years, you've been come legume, like a vegetable. She said, Graziella, to you I may have seemed come legume, but the places I've been, you know. So she had been on her travels, by golly, you know. That's why I always say that when people are treating people who seem to be in senility or in Alzheimer's or things like that, don't think that just because their surface mind does not seem to be focused in quote, normal ways, that their depth mind is not traveling and preparing and joining, in a sense, a much larger universe.
I was raised as an atheist, but in my 20 years of experience in working with people facing life-threatening illnesses, and especially terminal illnesses as a nurse, they've really shown me that there is something much greater out there, a higher power, another reality that people seem to go into at the time of death.
So here we are, the end of a big story.
It's been in the movies after all.
Yeah, the hard way.
A scientific study entitled Deathbed Observations of Physicians and Nurses documented over 50,000 deathbed visions shortly before the moment of death. Researchers found that just before death, the person in the process of dying would be filled with an unexplainable joy. Their last words often made reference to an unseen deceased family member who had arrived to take them home. Or they were heard to utter words like, "Oh, the light of God is come."
When I close my eyes, I can see light, white light, which I believe is coming from God. I trust that this light is part of power of God, which will be experienced after death fully, or more fully.
One man shared with me how he had had a dream about 2:30 at night. He was dreaming, and then he woke up. He just woke up, and his mind was crystal clear. And he saw his wife floating above his bed. She hadn't died yet, but she was floating above his bed. And she said, "I'm about to leave this world, and I just wanted you to know that I love you, and I'll always love you, and it's beautiful." And he told me she had no marks of the cancer. She had a young, beautiful, youthful body like he knew when he married her when they were 18. He got up, he got dressed, he drove to the inpatient unit. He walked into her room, he held her hand. He said, "I love you." And in that moment, her soul left this world completely.
There's one woman in particular who spoke about arriving at a party per se. And this is a woman who was very independent And it was very clear that she had no spiritual beliefs about what was going to be happening after her death. But she was very anxious to get on with it, you know. I also find that people who are in the process of dying and sometimes are trying to describe their experiences, there's a lot of symbolism in that. In this woman's case, as she was going in and out of consciousness, she was saying, "Where's the bus? The bus is late. Where's that bus?" After a while, finally, a white ambulance came that she reported. And she got into the white ambulance and she tended to calm down for a while. We didn't hear anything from her for a while. And then suddenly, everything changed. There was this absolute sense of joy that came over this woman's face that I had never, ever seen before. This sense of peace and joy went down her entire body, and her arms just completely turned over, her hands went up, and they just went up to the ceiling. And she said, look at the celebration that is here for me. And that was so remarkable to see that. Her daughter and I, standing at her bedside, just stared at each other. And the daughter, who had her own questions about what happens after death, was just in tears because she felt so validated in knowing that, yes, there really, really is something out there. There is a place to go, and it is a wonderful place to go.
At the moment of death, as a person is dying or during a near-death experience, it may very well be that the person is making a transition from the material world, where objects in the material world, including the senses of our body, are operating at speeds less than light speed, are being transferred over into the immaterial or spiritual world, or the world of faster than light speed, the so-called superluminal world, and in that transfer over, the tunneling effect may be taking place in much the same way that it appears to take place as we move into a black hole.
Let go. Upward. And sound. Incredible noise. Just the sound of change of state. This body. Breathe. Heart to head. See light. Separate. Calm. There's no limit. Calm. I am I am.
Although there is no absolute scientific proof of life after death, mounting evidence points to what spiritual traditions have been saying all along, that consciousness does continue after death. There is no death, only a change of worlds, said Native American elder Chief Seattle. And after Swiss psychoanalyst Dr. Carl Jung's near-death experience, he stated,
What happens after death is so unspeakably glorious that our imaginations and feelings do not suffice to form an approximate conception of it.
So what does happen to us after physical death? We've asked the following experts.
Jesus guides you up.
You go up in the sky to heaven, you stay with God, you help God make people good.
Maybe that's the end. Nothing happens after that.
You walk down the road and you meet your ancestors, and then you meet Ieto, our creator, and you suffer no more.
I think your spirit comes back to help people down here.
I think if you had a good life, you would go up to God and stay with him. If you had a bad life, he would send you back down until you got it right.
You pick what you want to be in your next life, an animal or a person.
You keep on coming back.
Your consciousness at the time of death is very important for the progress of the soul. I don't have a clue.
Then I asked, how can I prove to people that they meet people who died, that they are really alive, that there is life after death? And again, a few days later, I met a man who had an incredible experience. He was driving on a highway, and on the side of the road was a woman lying who was hit hours before by a hit-and-run driver, and just left lying in a, what do you call that, on the side of the street. She wasn't critically injured, any visible injury, but she was lying there. It's not normal for a woman in her 30s to lie on the side of the highway. Nobody stopped. One car after the other drove by. And this guy, which I call a good Samaritan, stopped and asked this woman, is there anything I can do for you? And she looked at him very surprised and said, no, there is nothing anybody else can do for me. But he didn't get the symbolic language. But he did not leave her. He stayed with this woman. And then after a few minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes, she opened her eyes and said, maybe there's one thing that one day you can do for me. Go to the Indian reservation and give my mother a message. And she described the woman's name and where she lived and said, tell my mother that I was okay. I was not only okay, I am very happy right now because I'm already with my dad. And then she died in the arms of this total stranger. This guy was so excited that he was at the right time, at the right place, that this poor guy drove 700 miles out of his way to the Indian reservation, found a woman who was not terribly distraught and upset to hear about the death of her daughter, but was very excited and explained, almost apologized to the guy why she was not totally distraught. She said, you understand, the message that my daughter gave me, that she's already with her dad, and she could not have known that my husband died an hour before the car accident of my daughter, 700 miles apart. And this guy, now she changed this guy's total life because he was the bearer of the good news. And then he told me this story, and I was very grateful and said thank you to my...
When my son Stephen was 15, he hanged himself from a tree across the street from where we lived. It was the most difficult, traumatic time of my entire life. One time, my daughter and I were sitting in the living room after a medical program that I'd been involved with, had one more day to go, and the Christmas tree that had, the ceramic Christmas tree that had a little music box in it began to play Silent Night. We had not wound it over and over and over again. And my daughter said, Stephen's here. And I paused and I could feel his presence. And I began to hear him speak, and I wrote down what he said. And he said, after the communication where he told me some things I would do, books that I would write that he would dictate from the other side, he said, Mom, I know what a skeptic you are. In order to prove this communication's true, someone is going to give you a piano, and it will be delivered before Christmas, and you'll know that what I have said to you is true. I went to the medical program the next day. A couple came up to me. They said, we feel that we need to give you the money to buy a piano. And I told them the story, and it was delivered before Christmas, just like Stephen had said.
My father, who was a very great comedian, he wrote many of the famous comedy shows of radio and television. And he was a complete atheist, agnostic. And he said, when you're dead, and that's it. Well, 10 days after his death of leukemia, I was guiding a meditation with students of mine, several hundred students. And it was a meditation in which simply they were going through doors and doors and doors of their mind, one door opening and another. And I figured, well, since I'm guiding this long, boring meditation, why don't I do it myself? So as I guided, I closed my eyes, and I found a door. And the door was paisley on the bottom, and it was glass on top. And suddenly there was my father. Now, I'm not a good imagizer. I am a good auditory thinker and a muscular thinker like an athlete. But
I don't tend to see pictures with my eyes closed, but this time I really saw one. And there was my father, grinning his happy grin. And for some reason I said, Dad, what shall I call you? And he said, call me Popsicle. Then he laughed and went away. And I called his wife, and I said, I had the darndest experience. And Dad said, call me Popsicle. And she got hysterical laughing. She said, you know, I just heard from Forest Lawn, which is where he was buried, or, you know, cremated. They were so backed up on cremations, they've been keeping him on ice. So this was his telling you something, call me Popsicle, you know, Pop. And no, that's a rather macabre story, but it seemed to indicate something. Well, then I had, 6 months later, another experience with my father. It was a lucid dream. Suddenly I was in a dream. I was asleep, but I was awake in my sleep. And there was my dad. Hiya, kid. And I said, Dad, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be dead. You know, that's a relative term. Well, Dad, what are you doing here? He said, well, I got some time off for good behavior. So I'll tell you what I've been doing. You know, I'm able to go all over the world instantaneously. Nobody can see me. And it's great. I get in for free into these comedy clubs. Now, kid, I've been checking out this club in Manchester where they got a great chicken act. I want you to go to Manchester and catch this chicken act. And he named the club. Hey, kid, down in San Diego, they got this wild act, you know, with two ladies and an ostrich. And I want you to go into that one. And then over here, and he named all these comedy acts. And there were about a dozen. He said, now look, I know that you're asleep, and you think I'm not here, but I really am. And try to remember the names of the club. This way, you can get all this material together, and you can create your own act, and you can quit this scam you're into. So, and the funny thing, I remembered about 3 of them when I woke up, and by golly, I called, and these acts were at these different places. Now, I don't know how to explain that one, but it was very funny at the time.
One of the very beautiful parts of seeing a deceased loved one, especially if he or she has had, say, an amputation or a disability, such as blindness or loss of hearing or anything like that, again, after they leave their physical body, that which is truly us, our spirit or our soul, is always healed and whole and complete. So literally, the lame do walk, the blind do see. And so we have a number of accounts in which somebody was paralyzed or something of that nature, but when they come back and we see them in their spiritual body, they are healed and whole and radiating wonderfully good health. And the blind can see, the lame can walk, and just as it says in so many spiritual books.
If the soul does continue after physical death, then it must reside in some pre-mortal realm of existence before it enters this physical dimension. At the time of birth, the soul leaves its celestial home and enters physical life. There are now thousands of accounts from parents who report that the souls of their future children have visited them before birth. They come in spiritual visions, announcement dreams, and even full materializations. In these visitations, these souls do not appear as infants, but possess their future physical characteristics and personality. These pre-birth experiences are especially intriguing in that many of the messages conveyed by these unborn souls predict events that later come to pass. They often thank their soon-to-be parents for bringing them to earth, tell them what their names should be, and sometimes even function as protective family garden angels up until their births. Birth is truly a welcoming party, a celebration of becoming. The child, says Mother Teresa, is God's gift to the family. Each child is created in the special image and likeness of God for greater things, to love and to be loved.
With my 5th pregnancy, I experienced a traumatic miscarriage, and that was very sorrowful because in dreams that I'd had and spiritual experiences, I had felt very bonded to this child. I had seen her as a young woman. her beautiful brown hair and brown eyes. I also noticed that she had a reluctance to come. And after the miscarriage, I prayed that I would have the opportunity to still bring her to the earth and be her mother. I had a very profound dream in that I saw a hospital room. I saw all the details of this room, and the nurse walked in with a little child and handed this child to me. As she placed her in my arms, I heard a voice, and the voice told me that this was my daughter, Sarah Rebecca. As I awakened from that dream, I realized that I had been granted the opportunity to bring her again. And I did conceive shortly thereafter. And during that pregnancy, I again threatened a miscarriage. I was very troubled, very distraught that I was going to go through the same thing again. I didn't feel like I could. And so I went in prayer, but I was not a kneeling prayer. I found myself totally on the floor in my bedroom, in total humility, begging that God would heal me and this child. During that prayer, I had an experience where I saw myself leaving a celestial home. I saw myself traveling down through the stars, and I noticed that the earth was very far distant, and I was frightened and very reluctant to come. Almost immediately in this vision, an escort appeared by my side, and he told me that indeed the earth was a great distance from where I came, but it was important that I go. And then I awakened from that vision, or found myself still on the floor in prayer, and I felt a very powerful presence of love enter my room. I stood, and I don't know how I knew, but I knew that that presence of love that had entered was the power of Jesus Christ. I began to communicate with him in prayer and ask him to please heal me and the child. And he spoke to me through that mental telepathy, mind to mind. And he said, I am the great physician. I will heal your body, and this child will come forth whole and well, for I have so decreed it. I went to my bed and felt a healing power upon me that gradually withdrew. And within a few hours, the hemorrhaging and the threat of the miscarriage had totally stopped, and I had been healed. Within a few months, we were driving to the hospital, preparing to deliver this child. When we arrived at the hospital, during the time of birth when things became most difficult, I began to pray, and a man appeared by my bed, dressed in white, and he said, I have personally escorted your daughter to the earth. And within a few moments, she was born. After the birth, the nurses said, we need to take you to a different floor. We're all full here on the maternity floor. And so they proceeded to take me down through halls and corridors and into a room that I had seen in a dream months before. And as they put me in my bed, I noticed that all the details were the same. And indeed, the door opened. The nurse brought in my little child. And I was reliving the promise that had been granted that indeed she would come forth. And so our daughter had arrived, safe and sound.
There was a couple that had a young daughter, 3 or 4 years of age. And then they had a newborn baby. And during a period of several days, this little girl kept coming to the parents and saying, "I'd like to spend some time alone with my new baby brother." Well, the parents were a little nervous about this. They'd heard of sibling rivalries, so they thought, well, maybe it'll pass. It did not pass. She persisted in her request, so they decided that they would allow her to do this. But they had a monitor in the room so they could listen over the intercom to what was going on. So the day came, they let her enter the room, and as they listened on the intercom, all was quiet for a few moments. And then they heard their daughter's voice to the boy child. "Tell me about heaven. I'm forgetting."
The actual moment of irreversible biological death takes less than 1 second. Preparing ourselves for this universal human experience takes a lifetime. Living with soul is a way of being in the world in which we are able to accept our physical mortality, yet live fully in each moment. This is possible only when we know, from direct experience, that the circle of life is not broken at the time of our physical passing. Only then will we be liberated from the subliminal fear of death. Freed from the fear of death, we will increasingly experience the transcendent, eternal love within our souls, a love that never dies. Freed from the fear of death, we will now have the courage not only to die, but to really live for the first time.
My name is Keani Cruz Schott, and although I may not look like it, I am in the final stages of a long struggle with cancer. It's been 9 years.
The fact that mine is incurable, is in the lungs, has metastasized to the bones, says death to me. And that's what the doctors have said. Facing the various traumas in my life does say opening the door to life. And somewhere in that mix, there's something real.
In dealing with this period before death, the quality of life is so interesting. To cultivate an ability to appreciate the preciousness of each moment. In a way, in most of our lives, we're so busy with time binding, with planning for the future or thinking about the past, that we keep losing the moment. We lose the moment. Our mind isn't with the moment. It's not with the next bite of food. It's not with the air across our forehead. It's not with the petal of the flower. And part of what this process of feeling the imminence of death can do for a person is push the consciousness into the moment more fully so that you are aware of the preciousness of each thing, the quality of life.
People are afraid of the moment of death. They see television programs where people choke to death or people suffocate or they're petrified of the moment of death. Most people that I met need a human being with them who is not afraid, who does not take off quick as a bunny. And I say to people, if you really love that person and want to help them, be with them when the end comes close and sit with them. You don't have to talk, you don't have to do anything. Don't expect this last horrible gurgling sound or a catching breath or a horrible scream or something. Most of the cases I've been there many, many, many times, it's a very quiet cessation of life.
I have also been at the bedside of many people who did go on to die, and one can observe in that situation that people on their deathbed who do slip on over at that point are beginning to get into this near-death experience. It's completely continuous with what we know from people who recover. Typically, people on their deathbeds, as they are dying, will very often look up and say, oh, there's Grandpa, or whoever, that they seem to be met by spirits, as it were, of relatives and friends who've already passed on. And also, quite often, people, as they are dying, will look up to us and say, oh, a light, a beautiful light.
For somebody who is in denial of the reality that they may be dying soon, or that they are dying soon, the one piece of advice I can give them is not to be afraid of death, that it is a very, very peaceful next step, and that this is an infinitesimal small blink of an eye in terms of time and this experience on this earthly plane, this physical plane. I think death is release.
The weird thing about knowing I'm sick is that I know in the heart of me there is wellness. And that's, the paradox is, in the midst of my illness, I'm getting well. And that one death can't take away.
This was born. No, in fact, one of the reasons you believe you're going to die is because you have been convinced you were born. This was born, no question about it. Body, born. Face, head, skull, flesh, born. But that which existed before this body, which inhabits this body, and which will exist after this body, is not some philosophical niche. And it is directly experienceable in this millisecond, in this moment.
As you get close to the end of a life, particularly mine, I can't help but think back on what it's all about. And, I think I was brought here mostly to raise my son and to bring him to a point of his young life where he is able to stand on his 2 feet. And I know that I'm not alone. I know that God has been with me through all of this. And my adventure has importance because they do reflect manifestation of my inner values, how I've lived my life. I know now that my body is dying, and I'm not going to fight anymore. I'm giving in to it, and I'm just using this very special time that I have to finish off everything, to make things right as far as I know, if there's anything I have left to do. But I think everything's done at this point. I mean, I feel good. I feel very, very good about everything. I just want to enjoy and love each other as much as I can, for as long as I can.
All of my life I've had a dream to give you my love into your life, into your heart, into your mind, and into your soul. Though it's sad to leave, I'm ready to go. Life's lessons received into my life, into my heart, into my mind, and into my soul. The light from the inward beyond has come to take me home. I belong to the spiritual sky. One day you'll be with me. to that realm of light. I will now return. Into the light, into love, back to my home, eternal soul.
According to a recent Gallup poll, over 22 million Americans have had a near-death experience. Nowadays, the subject of debate is no longer whether people have near-death experiences, but what do they represent? Are they but fabrications of the mind, real only for the person experiencing them? Or are near-death experiences actual inner journeys to other dimensions of reality, as the overwhelming majority of near-death experiences report upon their return to physical life? One thing is certain, however. Near-death experiences have powerful and enduring life-transforming effects for those who have crossed over to the other side, even for a few minutes.
Okay, we got the leads on. We're going into VTAC. I want 50 of lidocaine, and I want it now. I want an amp of bicarb. We're heading into VFib. I want 200 watt seconds on that defibrillator, and I want it now. Let's go. Please. Hurry up, we're losing her.
Clear the bed. Okay, clear.
Still in VFib, 360 watt seconds, please.
Clear the bed.
360.
Come on, we're losing her. I want an amp of epi, an amp of calcium, an amp of bicarb. Start CPR.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and bicarb. 1 and 2 and 3.
We're asystolic. We're losing her.
I could see the doctors trying to revive me. I found myself carried through a long tunnel toward a radiant light. The light was a person. I have never felt so completely known, so completely loved.
Hold compressions. We have a pulse.
Yet I knew I had to return.
We have a pulse. We're saving her. We're getting her back.
I'm a nurse. I had a friend that was a patient, did not believe in the hereafter, did not believe life after death was nothing. When you die, you die. Well, one night, there was an emergency down in 502. And upon getting there, it was my friend, and he was now in cardiac arrest. So immediately, I started to thump. It was my job to start working on his chest. Within a few minutes, the cardiac monitor showed that he was in a systole. Well, now, I looked up at this point and said, I wonder if you believe me now, you pineapple. And soon he was revived. Went to ICU, was on a monitor for a while, was later said to me, oh, Mary, I'm sorry. I saw you looking up at me. I knew you were talking to me.
I have been totally blind since shortly after my birth due to too much oxygen in the incubator, destroying the optic nerve. And I had a clinical death experience February 2nd of 1973 in which I was able to see. And I went sailing up through the roof of the hospital, and then I saw lights out on the street and buildings and everything like that, and I was, in essence, cavorting through the air and really enjoying the liberty that I felt, because I'd never been able to get around like that before.
I was struck by lightning in 1975. I was clinically dead for 28 minutes. I was completely paralyzed for 6 days, partially paralyzed for 7 months. It took me 2 years to learn to walk and feed myself. I lost more than 70 pounds.
While Daniel was in the light, he was shown on television screen light boxes the projected images of 117 future world events. As but one example, Daniel viewed a devastating explosion at a nuclear facility that took place in a desolate wintry forest. With eyes of spirit, he saw the word wormwood inexplicably appear on the screen and then just as quickly vanish. Only later did he discover that in the Russian language, the word for wormwood is Chernobyl.
In the course of that, what I learned is this: you do not die. You not only do not die, there is a method and a process and a system by which you leave this world that is built of love. An example, Bruce Grayson did a study in the early 80s about people who attempted to commit suicide. A study of over 400 people over years. Those people who had attempted suicide and didn't have any form of the near-death experience went on to attempt it at least 3 to 6 more times until they succeeded. The people who had some form of the near-death experience never ever attempted to commit it again, because the system in itself tells you your greatness. It tells you your worth and your value.
Rennell Wallace had a near-death experience as a result of her plane crashing in the mountains of Utah. Over 75% of her skin was burnt when the plane blew up. 2 days after she returned home from the hospital, Rennell entered a burning house and rescued 2 children trapped inside. Her life has been forever transformed by her experience on the other side.
If only I could only have such limited vocabulary in this life to express the incredible beauty, the incredible amount of love. And then when you're overwhelmed with that kind of love, you want so much to tell people here how wonderful that is. If people understood that, they would be able to release those who are holding on and wanting to go home. Let them be. Let them go through the natural process. I did not want to come back.
There's a knowing that is very peculiar. And then I felt this tremendous sinking sensation, as though every last drop of blood was drained from my body. And then there was a pop, and my spirit came up out of my chest and rose up above my body. I turned and looked down, and I could see myself lying there, just like I did when I was 4. And I came down for a closer look because I was looking at my body in a different way, from a multi-dimensional point of view. And as I looked at my body, I thought, my first thought was, oh my God, I'm dead. And there's no one here to tell this to. And as I looked to my left, there were 3 men that appeared there. And they had soft brown robes on, golden belts around their waists. And they said that they were my guardian angels, that they had always been with me throughout all my time here on earth. And have always been with me throughout eternities, they said. I wanted to go home to see my family, and I was able to do that, just simply by desiring it. I went there very swiftly. I could see my husband sitting in the chair, reading the newspaper. My children were laughing, throwing pillows, and preparing to go to bed. I looked at the clock. It was 9:45, and I was very much annoyed at my husband because he had promised me that he'd put the children to bed at 8:30. And so, of course, this was all verified later after I told him about the experience. And I said, and besides that, you didn't put the kids to bed at 8:30 like you promised. And he says, oh my gosh, this was never going to end. You're like this even after death.
As we make the transition from this world to the next world, we become more assured that we are light, there is light, and where there is light, there is love. Look for the way that best helps you to come to that place and that inner understanding. There are many ways, but the light is the light.
The journey of soul discovery consists in cultivating a moment-to-moment awareness that we are more than our physical bodies and personalities. But just as the moon's reflection cannot be seen on choppy waters, the blissful light of the soul, our true nature, can only be reflected in stillness. To experience our souls, we must relax and still the body and gently quiet the mind. We must learn how to interiorize our awareness and focus into the sacred inner space behind closed eyes. With proper training and guidance, we will come in contact with the divine light that is within each and every one of us. The way out is the way in. The way in is the way out.
I think one of the unfortunate things about the expression, the near-death experience, is that it implies that this kind of experience can only occur when people survive a near-death crisis of some sort. That's patently untrue. There are many ways in which people can have essentially the same kind of experience without having to go to the trouble of throwing themselves under the wheels of the nearest oncoming truck. For example, in meditation, through a mystical or spontaneous religious experience, through an out-of-body experience that's not occasioned by any kind of near-death event. There are lots of different ways in which the same kind of experience can come about. Nearly dying is only one reliable trigger to induce this experience, but there are lots of other ways it can happen.
I wouldn't say that I'm a religious person, even though I was raised Catholic and was an altar boy in my earlier years. But something happened that truly opened up my understanding of the true nature of my spiritual being. And that is a temporary night paralysis that I would experience at night and in the early mornings. This night paralysis led to what I now know to be out-of-body experiences. To verify I was having these experiences and not just dreaming, I would go to physical locations that I'd never been and identify what the people were doing there and the surroundings and what they were wearing at the present time. I would also identify the neighborhoods because I was flying around the neighborhood. I believe that 99% of us travel out of body almost every night, but only about 20 to 25% of us have conscious recall of these experiences. And I believe that if you learn how to travel out of body or know consciously what it's like to exist beyond the physical would be ideal preparations for transitioning death's door.
Sometimes people wonder whether when people claim to leave their bodies, they actually do. And there have been some experimental studies along these lines that I think are very suggestive. One famous one is by the well-known psychologist Charlie Tart, University of California at Davis. In one of these experiments, he worked with a woman who claimed to be able to leave her body pretty much at will. And in order to test her claim, what Charlie did was he rigged up a device that hooked her up with electrodes and so on so her brain waves could be measured and make sure that she stayed put at night also. And he put high above her on a shelf a 5-digit number. And her task was to get out of her body, to float up to eye level with this piece of paper, to read and then to remember the numbers and to report them the next day. She failed on the first 3 occasions, but on the last occasion, on the 4th session, she correctly reported the numbers. The odds against this happening by chance are 100,000 to 1. I think that's fairly suggestive.
The most profound experience that really illuminated my understanding of death came through the practice of meditation. In 1975, I had a very deep spiritual awakening where I merged into the effulgent white light above my head. And at that point, my body dissolved and my mind dissolved, and there was only the shimmering white golden light. At that point, I realized the truth of the self, of who I was, and realized there was no death for the self. The body could die, but the self was eternal, and it would go from one phase into another phase, unfazed. And that, to me, was a direct experience of the whole mystery. After that, over time, I began to meditate regularly and have this experience, literally on a daily basis, where I would go down this pathway. First, my body would dissolve, the mind would dissolve, and then I would merge into the white light and, in essence, die every single day. And over a period of time, I lost my fear of death and felt very comfortable with this merging into the light and, in a sense, dying. This, to me, was what I call divine behavior modification, and it was a profound teaching.
You know, there are references in practically all of the scriptures to the soul leaving the body. Like in the Holy Bible, it is said that there is something called the silver cord, which at the time of death is cut. And the silver cord is the means by which the soul leaves the body. It can leave the body and go into other dimensions. And by knowing a method of using the silver cord to leave the body and keeping it intact, we will be and we are able to go to these other dimensions at will, go back and forth. Death to us is not anything new at that time, because our beliefs are that the soul which inhabits the body is going to leave the body at the time of death anyway. So when we live in this life, we practice a form of meditation by which we can get into this inner realms, by which we can see the light of God.
I don't know if you've ever had an experience of divine light. It turns out that about 10% of all the people in America have, about 5% of us from near-death experiences, and the other 5% in dreams and in visions. But I've had 4 experiences of light, and all I can tell you is that you can't explain what it feels like. When I say to you that when you come out into the light, it feels like love is filling you up from the inside and pouring from the outside all at once. You feel tremendously acknowledged and seen, as if that spirit of love, that consciousness of love, whatever you call it, whether you call it nature or whether you call it God, but you feel that that spirit has seen you completely and has found you pure, even though it's seen all of your errors and all of your mistakes.
God is both within and without us. But in order to really have a closer communication with Him, you need to be able to withdraw your attention from the world. This world is known through these 5 senses: the sight, sound, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and so forth. But in order to know God, we need to be able to withdraw inwardly, not in on ourselves, but it is that in our deep meditations, going within, that we begin to find what we really are.
Spiritual references to divine light abound. The Christian Bible states, "If thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light." Jesus is referring to the third or single eye, which is the seat of the soul in the human body. The Buddhist text, Tibetan Book of the Dead, refers to the essence of our true nature when it says, "Thine own consciousness, shining, void, and inseparable from the great body of radiance, hath no birth nor death, and is the immutable boundless light." The Hindu Vedas counsels, "Rise above the 3 regions and turn thy attention to the all-absorbing sun within."
Unless one has really trained oneself to merge with divine presence, to go into Christ consciousness, most of us in our lives not only pull back from painful and difficult experiences, but we also pull back from the most deeply beautiful experiences. You're listening to the most beautiful Beethoven sonata that you can imagine. And as your heart opens to this beauty of this music, probably you'll come to a place where the degree of spaciousness is so much that something in you closes down. You're loving somebody, you're out at the beach, whatever it is, like this most beautiful experience. You get to a certain point and something closes down. Just so as you're going through the dying process, if you have not practiced embodying presence in this moment, in this next moment, probably the light will be too bright. The Tibetans say it's as if the brightness is like 1,000 suns. It's pretty bright.
It is a clear light which described in tantric teaching. that unless you train several years, impossible to realize that before death. So just as I think the certain, I say the different lights, different appearances. These not a sign of clear light. So you see these certain things, even just as we closed our eyes, you may see certain, certain appearances. And also in complete dark room, if you remain, then after some time you may get certain appearances. So these are, you see, good for gain new experiences, and also I think in order to I think expand our attitudes towards just the external thing.
But once we attain a state where we can still the mind and the outside disturbances of an environment do not affect us, then we can go into the inner realms without any problems. It takes time to get to that state. Generally, when we do our spiritual practices, when we meditate, that energy itself will help the environment. Because if we come in tune with God, we will become people who would be more loving, and that will radiate from us to other human beings, other people we come in contact. And the environment that we live in will become better and better.
To all appearances, Virginia Viddick's life was not out of the ordinary. A minister's daughter, married with 4 sons, a professor at the university, active in her community, but Virginia had a rich spiritual life that was extraordinary. For decades, she practiced meditation on divine light under the guidance of an enlightened teacher of meditation. Shortly before the cancer finally overtook her body, she expressed to loved ones that she was not afraid to die because she had already had, in her meditations, a direct, ongoing experience of the other side.
Life doesn't end with the passing of the physical body. That it continues, and that we simply have to tune into another reality. It's still, our consciousness remains, and it grows, and it opens up. There are worlds within worlds.
It's more than just belief. You have some experience of another reality.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
That's good for people to know, wouldn't you think?
Well, it helped me a lot, because when I knew that there was a God, it wasn't just knowing there was a God, it was knowing that there's a real plane of existence that is so powerful and so beautiful. And this is available to all of us. We just have to, it's just a curtain that we have to lift up.
From time immemorial to the present, spiritually awakened teachers from all religions have taught spiritual seekers methods of contemplation that help us get closer to God. Throughout his life, Sant Kirpal Singh, founder and president of the World Fellowship of Religions, taught thousands of people how to meditate on the divine light of God. He wrote, "The aspirant sees the real light within him, whereas normally the inner eye is covered by a thick veil of darkness. He then realizes that the tradition of the lighted candle found in churches and temples is to remind him of the divine light of heaven within. This light grows to the radiance of several suns put together as he advances on the way. From these wisdom traditions, it becomes abundantly clear that we do not have to wait for physical death or have a traumatic near-death incident to visit inner regions of light."
when you go into that state, there is such, it's a different world. It's a world of such peace, such sense of well-being, such awareness, not only of this world, but of the other world beyond. And as if there's an unbroken link or chain between yourself and the one who is sustaining you every moment. We think that we're beating these hearts. We think we're taking in this oxygen. We think that we are doing all of this. No, it is God who is doing it. When that realization comes, it makes you very humble. It makes you realize, Lord, thou art the doer, not I. I am nothing, and yet I am everything. Because you created me, you made me. You gave me the power to think. You gave me the power to reason. You gave me the power to love.
There's a light that many men they know about. They're turned about with visions dim, 'cause he's so vast, yeah. His life, it holds the oceans wide, gives birds their flight and blueness to the sky. And that is why I'm singing this song to you. I love him true, 'cause he's me and he's you. Oh, all the broken hearts in the world, all the sunken eyes, your chances open to be free. All the broken hearts in the world, all the sunken eyes, your chances open to be free. From air to earth, his light, it calls upon you to guide you through and let you in. We are his heaven, yeah. Our colors are his very might, rainbows of sight that crown it light. So man, just open the truth that is all within you. Let it come through, and we will come true, and we will come true, and we will come true, and we will come true.
What is death? Is it the end of life, or but a transition to a non-physical reality? Is there a spiritual essence in human beings that can be directly experienced, not only after death, but in everyday life? Is there any scientific proof that consciousness survives the physical body? If the answer to these questions is yes, then this deeper understanding of death can transform the letting go process and speed the healing of the heart. This video series will explore these and other vital concerns. The Healing Passages video collection features many of the world's foremost spiritual elders and scientific researchers. The programs are presented in a simple film style, which emphasizes direct eye contact from the on-screen experts, creating the feel of a one-to-one personal home visit. The videos have special healing value for people in the process of dying and their families and friends. Physicians, hospice professionals, nurses, social workers, and chaplains use these videos therapeutically as well as preventively. Parents, adults, teenagers, in fact, anyone interested in freeing themselves from the subliminal fear of death will greatly benefit from these videos. Indeed, to the extent that we deal with our human mortality by preparing now for a healing passage, we then become free to live more fully in the present. You'll also meet people in the process of dying who, as their final gift to us, gave their precious time and energy to appear before our cameras. These special people offer powerful wisdom on how they transform their fear, anger, and guilt into acceptance, forgiveness, and love.
As you get close to the end of a life, particularly mine, I can't help but think back on what it's all about. And, I think I was brought here mostly to raise my son and to bring him to a point of his young life where he is able to stand on his 2 feet. And I know that I'm not alone. I know that God has been with me through all of this. And my adventure has importance because they do reflect manifestation of my inner values, how I've lived my life. I know now that my body is dying, and I'm not going to fight anymore. I'm giving in to it, and I'm just using this very special time that I have to finish off everything, to make things right as far as I know, if there's anything I have left to do. But I think everything's done at this point. I mean, I feel good. I feel very, very good about everything. I just want to enjoy and love each other as much as I can, for as long as I can.
All of my life, I've had a dream to give you my love into your life, into your heart, into your mind, and into your soul. Though it's sad to leave, I'm ready to go. Life's lessons received into my life, into my heart, into my mind, and into my soul. The light from the inward beyond has come to take me home. I belong to the spiritual sky. One day you'll be with me. To that realm of light I will now return. Into the light, into love, back to my home, eternal soul.
The Healing Passages video collection was created by For a World We Choose Foundation by Elliot J. Rosen, author of the Los Angeles Times best-selling book and video, Experiencing the Soul. All monies received from the Healing Passages collection support the benevolent work of For a World We Choose Foundation. Please contact us for a complete media catalog.